G'day, TK here, and today we're in an Aussie junkyard and I've already got oil on my bloody head. Oh, struth. Anyway, today we're going to take a look at this junkyard here, and particularly for the Americans out there, I'm going to take you on a little tour and tell you all about the Aussie Fords, because it's very different to what you got in the States. You know, a few of these models, in fact most of them, you never got in the US. So we're going to walk around, we're going to have a look, have a look under the hoods, talk about the engines, talk about the cars. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now I want to start here. This I reckon is a maybe an XD or an XE Falcon, pointy little thing from the 80s. This is your big Aussie 4-door sedan. This used to be the standard family car. None of those little hatchbacks or anything back then. 80s and 90s, everyone was driving around your 4-door sedans. This is the Falcon. And fundamentally, big engine under the hood. Completely different from Europe. Oh, big 6 under there. I reckon that would have been a 3.9 back in the day. Carby, as you can see from the manifold there. And these things would do hundreds of thousands of Ks. No problem, mostly. But if you knew these back in the 80s and 90s, always with the louvers on the back hood. They were everywhere, kind of like my hair is right now. Now this next one is a classic. It's a modern classic. I don't know if you'll remember New Edge styling that looked really great on the MK1 Focus. Didn't look really good on Ford's other products. Here's the AU Falcon. This thing was a sales disaster. If you go and look at the sales graphs, and I'll put it in my article, you know, Falcon slowly going down because people getting sick of big cars. AU Falcon, huge dip because this thing was hideous. It's a little bit like the Pontiac Aztec though, in that now it's kind of a meme car. People love it. They're like, oh, the bloody AU, because it's hideous and it's funny. You had these awful headlights. This thing was also available with a 4 headlight, sort of round headlights on the sports models. You're not going to be able to see under there, but there's a 4-litre 6-cylinder, straight 6 under the hood, rear-wheel drive, as all the Falcons were. However, also available with a V8 in the sports models. This is one generation before the Barra. Still very reliable 6-cylinder engine, but sadly didn't have a turbo model and didn't have the same reputation as the Barra. You could still do, well, nobody really modified these engines. People would modify the V8s. The 6s really didn't get a lot of love until the XR6 Turbo on the BA Falcon, which is one generation after that. After these hideous AUs, Ford went to a much more standard sort of car shape design because, yeah, the AU was just a huge sales failure. Now, I don't know if you can see it too well behind me. This one's pretty beat up, but this is an EF or an EL Falcon. Now, these were just before the AU, much more of a simple car design. We'll see if we can find another one of those somewhere to demonstrate. Even before the EF there, that maroon one, we have the EB Falcon. Again, 4-litre straight 6 under the hood. This is a wagon model. These were just the standard family cars because petrol was cheap in the 90s. You know, I had one, I got maybe 15 litres per 100 kilometre, which was bad. It was bad. But nobody cared in the 90s. That was just your family car. You know, if you had a hatchback, a little 4-cylinder thing, you'd use less fuel, but nobody cared. If you were on a budget though, you'd get something like this. This is the Festiva. I don't believe America got this version of the Festiva. These ran 1.5 litre engines. I believe that's a Mazda-derived B engine, but I'm not 100% certain. But yeah, these were also everywhere. These were often like P-Plater or like, you know, starter cars for new drivers. My mother crashed into one of these in a Nissan Skyline R31, and I never got to drive the Skyline, so thanks for that, Mum. Yeah, really appreciate that. I'm kidding. But here's the BA Falcon. Let me see if I can flip this around and show it to you. So this is back, this is just after the AU, early 2000s. This is when Ford is like, okay, people don't like our weird, pointy, curvy design. We're going to make a car. This thing was, I don't want to say it was a sales hit because big cars were still out of fashion, but it did a lot better than the AU. Certainly, it brought Falcon sales back up a tick. Now this, every one of these, if it wasn't a V8, it had the Barra. It was a big improvement in interior design for Ford. Just a lot more of its era, a lot less ugly, better plastics, real conventional inside. It was just a car, but it was an Aussie car. They're great machines. They'll do 400,000, 500,000 clicks, no problem. The taxis are doing 700,000. Can I show you? Oh, there's the Barra, non-turbo. But this was the thing, these big six cars. I'm just going to jump out of the wind. These Aussie big sixes, particularly the Fords, they were heroic. You know, back in 1992, a Ford Falcon, just your standard GLI model with the multi-point injection, that thing would do 200 horsepower. The Buick 3.8 in the Commodores, that was only putting out 170, 180 at the same time. You know, your little hatchbacks, 90 horsepower, 70 horsepower. You know, a budget family sedan was putting out 200 HP to the rear wheels. You could even have them with a manual in some models in the early 90s. So yeah, those things were heroic. Another one here, this is a favorite of mine. This is the Laser. I think America might have gotten this as the Escort in some models. So this is a Laser hatch. These things, this is a 1.6. This is a Mazda B series 4-cylinder engine. Similar to what's used in the Mazda Miata, the early generations. But in a front-wheel drive configuration here with a what looks like a carby setup and a Ford valve cover, obviously. These things, they would also do a few 100,000 kilometers, no problem, if you took care of them. A lot of them got crashed, a lot of them got flogged. Here's another AU. This is the Intec 6-cylinder. This is just before the Barra, one generation before the Barra. You saw ABS on these. What was funny about these AUs, I know I'm jumping around a lot, even up to the AU, late 90s, early 2000s, Ford still didn't have independent rear suspension. The wagons actually had leaf springs on the rear. The sedans had coil springs, but yeah, not an independent rear. We got another early, that's like a late 80s Laser. I want to say TE, could be wrong, but look, beautiful color. Is it not? Let's get me out of the shot. After the AU, Ford went to the BA and then later the BF and FG Falcons. Much more of a car design, you know, less of those curvy, ugly, pointy curves, more just slap a car. But also what they did was they really got creative with the colors. This one's faded, but they weren't afraid to put some pops of color there, which was really appreciated by me at least. We got a Focus sedan here. Those are pretty rare. Most people went for the hatch, 3-door or 5-door. That looks like a Fiesta with the engine falling out of it. Another first-gen Focus. Let's see what else we can find. Maybe we can find here's one. 1989. So that's the Falcon Ute, and not a great example of it. This is the interesting thing. So this is, I believe, the XF Ute. So basically, it's an XF Falcon, but with a bed. And here's the thing. When they went to the EA, and I'm going to try and find one for you. When they went to the EA and EB Falcon, they couldn't be bothered designing an EA or an EB Ute. So they kept making the XF Ute, and they put an EA front on it-ish. Let's see if we can find one around here. Have a right laugh about it. But yeah, those are, I think there's a BA Falcon Ute, so they actually redesigned that. Here we go, here's another XF Ute with the earlier Ford 6. Oh, that's heavy. Look at that carby. Actually, I reckon that's a custom valve cover because I don't think they were chrome from the factory. Could be wrong. See if, oh, look at that classic interior there. I'll see if I can show you the gauges. Yeah, so this is 999. So this is still a real XF. But Ford did go ahead. Oh, that's going to open. Look at that. So this is still the XF. You've got your weird gauge there. I hope you can see that. Yeah, so that's an XF. I want to see if I can find one that's actually the. So here's an EA or an EB. Let's see if we can figure out which it is. So this is the sedan. I'm gonna see if I can find you the Ute. 993. So that'll be an EB or maybe even the ED sedan. Have a look at this generation. Now that's the 4-liter overhead cam. Fuel injection multi-point on this one. This one's also LPG. Now, if you haven't heard of LPG, it's liquefied petroleum gas. Basically, it's a hydrocarbon that at room temperature and pressure is a gas. But if you put it in a cylinder, you can liquefy it. There would have been a giant tank in here. See, that's what that big pipe is for. There would have been a big fuel tank in the back for storing that petroleum gas. But it looks like it's been taken out. And you would actually have to pop the trunk, or the boot as we call it here, and fill up your LPG in the back. Ford actually made some factory LPG cars in the BA series in the early 2000s. Those became known as the green top Barras, and they're actually, for some reason I don't quite remember, they're actually considered some of the best motors for turbo conversion. I think because something in the head is different on those LPG motors that makes them good for making high power with when you put them back on petroleum or gasoline. This is one. This is your, shit, what do they even call these? Well, this is a Falcon, obviously, but it's got the big back on it. Holden had the Sandman, and Ford had these. This was actually in the 90s they were making these. Again, your 4-liter overhead cam. But yeah, you can see even though this, so the date on that's wrong. But even though this is a 90s car with the 90s engine, call it the long reach. Even though this is a 90s car and a 90s engine, it's still got the XF Ute back end on it, and it's an absolute mess in there. These were often used as tradie vehicles or tradesperson vehicles in the US, you would call them. So plumbers, glaziers, maybe not glaziers, but like plumbers, electricians, they love these because it's the benefit of a Ute and it drives like a car, but it's got a canopy on it that's completely sealed from the factory, so harder to steal your tools. The personality is either fun or incredibly grating, and I apologize. So that's a Fairlane. That's the luxury version of the Falcon from the 80s. Engine completely pulled to bits, but it's got the 4 headlight setup, and this was something the Australian automakers often did. They'd have, Holden had the Commodore, then you get the Statesman, which had like a same platform but different front end, different rear end to make it look fancier. Ford did the same thing. You had the Falcon. Then you had the Fairlane and Fairmont, which again would swap out the headlights, a few other bits of trim, different interior to make it seem like a luxury car, but really it was a Falcon underneath. Usually the same engine options with a couple premium tweaks. Falcon, 1997, but it's this really squared off rear end. That's the XFU design. And again, if we come around, I can't show you the interior because it's full to bits, but yeah, we got the fuel injected 4-liter engine in here instead of the old school XF engine. So yeah, basically Ford just stuck those two cars together to keep making the Ute. It looked really silly because the EA EB Falcon was quite a smooth, rounded design. And then you had this XF ancient, 1980s, early 80s tray on the back. Very silly. This is an interesting one. So this is the EA Falcon. This was the first generation of Falcon when Ford went from the angular XT, XE, XF design to curved. Now, the EA was only around for a couple of years and it was a bit crap. That's because, I'll show you the badge, or the remnants of the badge, 3.9 litre engine. Now this was central fuel injection. One big fuel injector. I can't show you because the manifold's gone. One big fuel injector on this. I've been told you could idle that thing in drive in the automatic and it would roll all the way up to 50 kilometers an hour, 20, 30 miles an hour. Very strange power delivery. Just wasn't considered a very good engine. A couple years into production, they switched to the EB. They did the 4-liter, still mostly the same engine with multi-point fuel injection. In my opinion, a great engine. Would do excellent power, very smooth, but did use a hell of a lot of fuel. But I think I've shown you most of it, most of the Ford product that we had over the last sort of 30 years. Now, you're not seeing any of the later Falcons here. This is a junkyard, you're not going to see any of the modern stuff. But there's one thing you've probably noticed, and I'm going to going to try and find a nice comfy car to sit down in to tell you this next thing, because there's one thing you probably missed. One thing you didn't see. Hair in my face. But yeah, let's talk about the one thing we missed today. What was the one thing you didn't see as an American that you'd see in every junkyard in America? V8 engines. The thing is, from the, a lot of cars in the US had V8 engines. We had them in our big sedans, our Falcons, our Commodores. They actually dropped out of the Falcons in the 80s for a while, came back in the 90s. But from the 80s onwards, maybe even a bit sooner, the V8 was always a premium option. We didn't really have cheap V8s. I mean, we did have cheap V8s, but like the V8, you know, the vast majority of families would pick the straight 6. Your GLs, your GLIs were all straight 6s. Same thing for your Commodores. Your executives were all 6s, V6s in the 90s. But the V8 was always a special option. And so if you have a V8 Falcon or Commodore, you're not selling it to this wrecking yard for $200. You're parting it out. You know, you're selling it as a whole. You're not sending it down to the junkyard. So you notice I've gone past, you know, 30, 40, 50 cars. Not a single V8 because they don't end up in the junkyard. They're too special for that in Australia. As well, you know, we don't have. We had Utes. The Utes were based on the cars, so the Utes were based on the Falcons and the Commodores. Again, they mostly had the straight 6s. The performance models had the V8s, but again, they're too special to be in a junkyard like this. You know, you'd sell the parts yourself, or you'd sell the engine separately. You wouldn't just sell your rusty V8 to the junkyard for $200. And I think that's the thing about it. Whereas in America, you know, you had your pickup trucks. We don't really have pickup trucks. We had Utes. We have pickup trucks now. We got the Hilux, you know, the Triton from Mitsubishi, the Nissan Navara. But again, you know, we had the mid-size and the smaller ones. We didn't really get the US style F-150. A few came in, but they weren't a big deal here. Yeah, so V8 pickup trucks aren't a thing. So yeah, we don't have like those iron head V8 engines in their millions in the junkyards. We just have straight 6s, and they're dying out because they stopped making Falcons years ago because everyone wanted small cars. So yeah, almost zero V8s in an Aussie junkyard. Obviously, if you go to a classic junkyard for muscle cars, yeah, they're going to have them. If you go to something a bit more special, but in your sort of pedestrian junkyard that punters like me go to and get oily, no V8s. You will find almost none, which makes it hard if you want parts. You have to actually go and pay for them somewhere else. But yeah, I think that's been a nice little tour. Hopefully you enjoy that, and I think we should do it again sometime. Maybe we look at the Holdens. Maybe we look at some other brands, some other stuff. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed our little tour. Until next time.